Welcome. This is the Drupal usability meeting for September 30th, 2022. I'm Benji Fisher moderating, and also present are Offer Schall, who's sharing his screen, Simo Helston, Antonia, Ralph Kohler, and Thomas Howell. Offer, start us off.
Hi, everyone. So I've been working on DrupalPod. Whoever doesn't know the context, it helps contributors to go to issue pages in Drupal.org, look for something to work on or to test, either patch or issue fork, and clicking on a button using a browser extension I created, you get a full remote development, a full development environment in your browser that you can work with, push code, test everything, and all that. The next level of this would be to bring what the browser was doing. Until now, the browser, if you can see my screen, you would click on top, set options after you go to a Drupal.org page, and then get your environment ready. This proposal is about bringing what the browser would do to the actual issue pages that we have now. If you're familiar with either Dreditor or Tugboat, I've seen a lot recently that next to each, as you can see in the screenshots here, next to each patch or issue fork, you'll also have a button to just click on because it understands, instead of going somewhere else, because that's what the browser extension was doing, making selection of which version you want to run and all that, and then run it, you'll have a button added to the patch. So I bring it to the UX meeting because we want to get more feedback on what makes sense, what will be easier to understand and not overwhelming with the amount of things that are already exist there. We have some edge cases to take care of. So this is this topic. Any questions so far before I go to more details?
Did you remember to read the issue number for the sake of the recording?
Let me read the issue number. The issue number is 3312543. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So go ahead.
The screenshots I have, yeah, and if you have questions, please. I don't see the chat, so feel free to speak up or else. So what we're seeing here are screenshots, kind of photoshopped, that show here's what we see with a patch. Usually on an issue, we'll have on top of the issue a summary of the latest patches, so it will appear also there, as well as you scroll down and you see different comments, patches might be there. Every time there is a patch, you would usually see something like that where tests were run. At this retest is already part of it. This is another patch. And then in the middle here, we added test remotely via DrupalPod with an option button as well. So the idea is that if you'll click on test remotely, it'll know this is the patch you want. It will know certain default assumption that a user can also update. Let's say like Drupal version, PHP version, do you like to use the Velen admin toolbar? All these things that are usually helpful for, and do you want to install with it umami, standard, minimal, or nothing? Depends on what you want to test. If you'll click on DrupalPod, you'll get to the documentation. That's kind of similar to what Tugboat was doing. Here's a line that already in issue pages where you can click on view live preview, that takes you to a live preview, and via Tugboat, that takes you to understand what Tugboat is. And Tugboat options are view log and rebuild over here. One more thing to keep in mind, there's a little bit of a difference if you're about to deal with a patch for core or issue fork and contrib, like modules and themes, because in core, you choose the core version, but in contrib, you get to choose the module version as well as core version. That's pretty much the difference of the options added. Any questions so far?
This would be very helpful in the usability meetings, I'd say. Anytime I
Right.
want to test a patch or an issue
Yeah,
for.
yeah. I mean, so until this is ready, you could install a browser extension of Drupalpod. And as we speak here about different issues, you can look at the issue, click on it, but this would make it even more simple that anyone can
Yes.
click on it, get an environment, we get to share that environment, test things on that environment, and throw it when we're done. So the idea was, again, trying to make it concise, very clear. We want to know if this wording works. One of the things you might notice, this one says test remotely, where here it actually says test and develop remotely. I'm not sure if we should make the two differences. I'll tell you what the difference is. In general, that I think this is a mistake in the screenshot, but a patch is something, I look at it like a read only. You cannot push code to a patch or something. You will create a new patch and from there do something. So for people who want to test and everything, they can just use that. The test and develop remotely is about when there is an issue fork that I can actually click on a link, and that link is something I could use commands like git push when I made changes and have the changes loaded automatically to the page. I'm not so sure if we should use two different words here because I think it's so similar, and yeah, that's my thing. Options is when you want to go to like advanced options, because when clicking on options, even the issue has a version number. You might want to work on a different version number, or you might need a specific PHP version number. You'll be able to choose I want devel or admin toolbar. We might find other modules that are good or for what we need. You get to choose which kind of install profile you want, and then something about keep that setting for the next time I need to make choices. So allowing you, if that's your favorite, you can kind of keep it. So the next time you'll click on test and develop remotely, these settings that you saved would be the one running. And I would love to get your feedback. Or if you want to see more or have questions.
I have a short comment, but anyone else want to speak up first? My comment is simply that I think test and develop remotely is too many words, that these pages are very, very cluttered, and just test remotely is more effective.
Okay. Nice.
And there's also the consistency. It's easier to recognize if it's the same text on all issues, and we can worry later in the process about whether we can actually use this for pushing patches or pushing new work.
I have a brief question. What happens when you don't have the browser plugin?
So today, actually, for the recent DrupalCon, I created a special launcher that you don't even need the browser plugin because you can go to a page. But this change means that you do not need anymore a browser plugin. The issue pages themselves, we would make an update to Drupal.org code, and the issues themselves would support a quick link to DrupalPod.
Okay, then the only comment that I would have is kind of next to where it has options. And again, this may be too busy, so Benji, shoot me down if you disagree. I would want to have a very visible links to the documentation so that people know how to use this. And I don't know if it's better to put it when you press the test remotely and it gives you an option to go look at instructions on how to do this. And I'm thinking very specifically, I would want to see a 30-second video that just shows you this is what you're going to now do.
Yeah.
Because that way it's kind of in-app, and I've become a bit enamored of having documentation on things that are a little bit that you may not use every day, with the documentation being in-app rather than having to search for it on D.O.
Nice. Okay. So one of the link here, the one that says DrupalPod, would take you to the documentation of DrupalPod. And I'm thinking, what if we add like a small icon maybe of document that then maybe what you just said, like give you a blurb or a quick YouTube. Is that something what you mean? Or
Yes,
should
that
it
would
say the
be
word documents?
that would be perfect. I definitely like, my eyes don't go down to where we have in all case like the link. I definitely like that better. Like something that makes like, I guess I wouldn't know what DrupalPod is, so I may not know to click DrupalPod, but a question mark or an icon that made it very clear that there was more information. Now, from a accessibility perspective, I don't know how to make certain that that's equally apparent, but that would be great.
So are you saying that like a document icon is a solution?
Yes, a document or a question, whatever is commonly accepted icon. Like for me, it's help. Like I would have something that would just say like whatever the standard help icon is. I don't know what it is offhand. But a document would be fine. Something that makes it tied to the DrupalPod word, I guess. Though
Okay.
maybe you don't even need the word DrupalPod. I mean, I don't know. I would today I would be confused if I went to a page for the first time as an outsider and saw the word DrupalPod. I might not even choose to click it because I wouldn't know why I should click it.
And if it said test remotely, would that help, or would you click test remotely? Like,
Yeah, Offer, I think you mentioned that you were basically following the pattern for tugboat, and that currently the tugboat leads to the word tugboat leads to additional documentation, and you were just following that pattern. But I think I agree with Thomas that that is not clear, and maybe that's a pattern we shouldn't follow.
okay, that's good
And,
feedback.
and maybe we should also change the tugboat link. And yeah, I'm not sure what the
Yeah,
best
maybe if
solution
it
is. Ralph, I think Ralph wants to say something.
Yep. One question. When tests are still running, or if they have failed, is the link then still shown like test and develop remotely via DrupalPod, or
Yeah,
it not?
so it's very not related to test, even that it's next to it. Maybe there should be something, I don't know, a separation. As soon as there is a patch or as soon as there is an issue fork, it will work regardless of how tests are doing or if they exist or not.
Could we
Okay,
use the word try instead of test or some other word?
Oh, okay, because yeah, test is appearing here.
So try out or something like that.
Yeah, before I used, well, there was a browser extension and I kind of use word like things like launch, development environment. But yeah, I'd love help with the right words. Because it allows you to have, without any setup, a full Drupal development environment. Yes, you can just use it for, we don't need to be a developer, and you can click on it and use it to test different things. You don't need to touch code. But it's the same environment anyway, or the same kind of environment that you create.
In the chat, Antonia suggests preview. I kind of like try and just sort of rephrasing the whole line. I would suggest something like try with Drupal pod and then paren documentation and make documentation the link to documentation.
Okay. So try with Drupalpod, then parentheses of documentation.
Go ahead,
And
Ralph.
try with Drupalpod is one link.
Yes.
Okay.
But to get back to the tests and the decoupled nature of it currently, but what would people experience if the tests are fail in one or more, and the possibility that the test in Drupalpod will also has problems applying the patch, so that might confuse people not familiar with the patch workflow. So would it make sense to only show the however it will be called, test and develop remotely, or test in Drupalpod, only if the tests are running through okay and green?
My personal thing would be not to attach these at all, because again, think of, especially, that's a great example. I created a core patch, the test fail, I'll click on Drupalpod to go fix the test, because that's the development environment where I can also run tests, quote unquote, locally, remotely there, and
Okay.
see what failed, or like go and fix it, run the test locally there, push a new commit, or generate a new patch. So this is the development environment. There shouldn't be a reason not to allow people to trigger it, because that is how they're going to fix whatever is not working well.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think also as a practical matter, the various cases of patch applies, patch doesn't apply, fails tests, passes tests, getting all of that information into the issue page is just a lot of complexity that there might not be a good way to do it. I think once you've clicked on the link, see what happens, and then you can distinguish between patch and merge request, what your workflow is going to be. I'll offer, if it is a patch rather than a merge request, can you use Drupalpod to generate a new patch?
Yeah, so there's two, at least today in browser extension, there's two ways. Once you are creating, you're clicking on a patch, it will apply, it does things for you. So it will apply a patch for you, and you can make the changes, generate a new patch, download it, and upload it here as a regular interface, just like you would do on your local machine. The other option that is available today is you can choose both in the browser extension, which I'm not sure if we'll have at the beginning at the interface, but you can choose both a patch and an issue fork, assuming the issue fork is new or doesn't have anything yet, if you're the one open it. And what that will do is it will apply the patch and will have these changes ready for you to push code into the fork. So that's a very easy way to get patch into a fork.
Oh, and I missed this. Simo had another suggestion in the chat. Should it be try with Drupalpod or try in Drupalpod? I was suggesting with.
Just for me, it's kind of like kind of open in a new tab, or try in. Yeah, because
what if it would say develop in Drupalpod? without, like, I want people to use it for test as well, but yeah, I don't know. That's my question.
I don't like using the word develop because I think that will scare away people who just want to be doing testing. And in the chat, Thomas and Ralph agree with the alternative. I didn't say this out loud, but I typed it in chat. Instead of using documentation for the link, use what is this? I'm sort of old school and I don't like using contractions in written work, but I guess Thomas and Ralph are both suggesting the contraction, what's this, rather than what is this? But
So in the parentheses after try with DrupalPod?
Yeah.
Or try in DrupalPod? And do we have a, between try with DrupalPod and try in DrupalPod, is there a preference?
shall we take a quick vote? Who approves of in?
Me.
And who approves of with? I see 3 thumbs up, including my own. So I guess that's a slight preference for with.
Okay. The question about the option. So again, before following Tugboat had options over here. Now with DrupalPod, having options here makes sense. Should option be closer? Should have an arrow because it's not about clicking a link that would take you to a different page. It's more like this gray area would open up.
That excuse me, is that a details element?
Yeah, it is.
Then I think it should be styled like a details element.
Okay.
Rather than styled like a link.
Yeah, I think we also have it somewhere else that it is like that on the page of issue pages. Yeah, don't remember where, but yeah, okay. Options is good. Should it be away? Should it be close? No comment.
I think away is good because again, I don't like too many words at once. I want to make it easy to scan.
Yeah.
So, crowding 3 links into 1 line is a little much. So I like the separation.
Okay. Then we have the interface of making choices here. Here you can see it's like a text input, but what really happens, let's see if I have it working. This is a little older design using the detail thing and all that and advanced options. So let me make my screen a little bigger. The interface I have today is what you see here. And you see the green thumbs up. The idea, what I thought is there's so many versions possible. So having a drop down would be something very, very, very long and maybe less helpful. What I have now is when you start clicking something like the number 9, you get everything, you get all the options DrupalPod is aware of that are probably possible, which is latest 8.9.x, latest 9.3, 9.3.x, 9.4.x. So it allows you to quickly choose something. Regardless, it would check your syntax, the format of the version, and would tell you if that's a valid format or not. But the idea here was like not showing a very, very long dropdown, but maybe that is a better solution. Again, remember, this is like in advanced options. Chances are by default, it's using, if it's a contrib module, the latest stable Drupal that the module supports. And otherwise, if it's a core issue, it will take whatever the core issue version is set on. Where when we go here, let me try something. Okay, so when you click on the PHP version, it knows what it compares with what Drupal core version you chose and tell you what's supported and what is not. You can still choose what's not supported, but it gives you some
because you might
extra
be working on PHP issues.
Right. Or you need 8. Yeah, I don't know. You need 8.2. We need to figure that one out. But also, just so you know, it compared to how it is in the browser extension now, this would become a link. And I don't know if you can see at the bottom of my screen, a link is much easier to, if someone needs to hack for a very unique case and, you know, edit things in here. But that's advanced usage. Yeah, so that's about choosing PHP version and choosing core version. So I would like to get some feedback on that.
I don't know how much work it would be to implement and maintain, but if you can put the most commonly used Drupal core versions at the top, then I think a select list, even if it's long, is
Okay.
a better interface.
I think Simply Test me have a long one. Simply Test me.
.me.
I think in some cases it might be that we need to be able to select like from a long list of versions, because if we need to test what was the last version it worked with in that kind of situation.
I think I really, really did not like this. And that is why I created the alternative. Like, this is, to me, extremely overwhelming. Even that it starts with some latest, there's just so many options here. But maybe it is better.
This may sound like a bad idea, but what about breaking the version down into multiple fields, so you can go like 10, you pick major version, minor version, and then you get the list of what's available in a third field.
That's the kind I like that kind of interface. Like, for instance, yeah, I use it sometimes with hierarchical taxonomies. So there is the
like, I want to use Drupal 10, Drupal 9, Drupal 8, like something like that, and then choose
Yeah, I mean that
versions
is
within that.
it could be either way. It really depends on if you want. So right now there are two fields. One is the Drupal core and the second is the total version. You could break the total version into 3 fields. So major, minor, and then I guess whatever they call sub. And that would have the betas and all the different versions. Or you would take the major version and make it part of what you're picking. You pick Drupal 10 core and then have 2 fields. So you'd either start with, it's just basically breaking that down where the periods exist. It's a hierarchical approach, as mentioned.
Yeah, because like even 9.5, right, has many options because we
Right.
have alpha and beta and
But you're making it
X.
easier to get to, and that's basically all you're trying to do is limit those choices. I mean, you could even break everything after the dash, so you could have 4 fields. I think that's too complex.
That might be actually also a usability issue to have that kind of split, if it's like for the like
Like if someone is already right, like we're saying there is a version here, so it will be selected by default. You don't need to touch it. And then you decided to change something, should we assume the person can write their version and get some suggestions, or we want to give them everything?
That's a good question.
I guess my thought was like, oh, these advanced users, they can type a version and they'll get, if you decided to do this, it'll tell you there is no such a thing.
Right. I mean, you could also have, no, I don't want to, this is so busy. Like Benji's concern earlier was correct. I've got to think on it.
Or I guess maybe displaying only latest in a free form. I don't know anymore. Or let people get the full list if they really want it anyway.
I mean, you could do an autocomplete where it gives you versions as you type it out.
Yeah, that's what this is using. Although I think the actual list,
That is so tiny.
sorry, I think even if I make my my screen bigger, somehow that interface stays tiny. It says latest 8.9, latest 9.3, 9.3x, and 9.4x.
Right. So then if you had all of the versions available, like on the simplytest.me, you'd see like a lot more versions, and we went 9.3.
Right. And as you start
Yeah.
typing more, you'll get less. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, that seems fine to me. Like I just don't imagine that I would know always the precise version, but it is an advanced use case.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. For me, that's why there's a word here. If 0.9, you'll have latest 9.3. So you don't have to know what is the latest. It kind of tells you by the word latest in the autocomplete option.
Yeah, I'm beginning to think that you're right, that the autocomplete is the right interface. And I'm thinking of two use cases. So one is a site owner who's run into a bug, wants to know whether this patch will fix it. And in that use case, there's a particular version. My site is running 9.3.12, and I want to know whether this will fix it on 9.3.12. So single autocomplete text field works well for that. The other use case is someone working on the issue who wants to get it into the next release of Drupal core. And they're just going to want to use the current branch, which is going to be the default anyway. So I think in both use cases, the autocomplete field works pretty well.
Okay. And PHP version should use a similar, like what I liked in this is that it is important to know what you can use and what you cannot. I guess with the limit of you would not have a super flexible PHP version, but I think it's a much more rare to choose anything that is not these.
Yeah, and it's also not an overwhelming list. So I think what you have there is fine.
Okay. Yeah. When having so keep in mind this is for core, and when we have a contrib module, you'll have one more probably auto select like that, autocomplete with the available module versions, because you'll choose what's the module version by default, it will be from the issue page itself. And then you would choose which Drupal core you want to run it on. That will be limited to whatever the module supports. Or maybe, I guess limited is not the right word because you might need to create a new version of that. But
Yeah, and I think the same argument applies that either you're a site owner and you can type in the version you're currently using, or else you're a developer and you'll want to use the most recent version. And in both cases, I think the autocomplete works well.
okay. Going back, so these checkbox, these are the other option, and you have other things that maybe I forgot. Feel free to say them, but it was like the develop admin toolbar. I think the check mark should be before which modules should be enabled.
Yeah, I think so.
And spacing, but that's like yeah, cheap Photoshop. And yeah, which these are like similar, at least this is to the browser extension where you get to choose which installed profile you want to choose.
Where does it save the current settings?
This part, the save
Yeah.
current settings. That's a great question because so save current setting is the ability to use these settings the next time I open a core issue. Right, I have my install profile. Sorry, this is probably Drupal core. So it's on core issues, it would always take first the issue version and not yours. It's more like if I'm working on contrib and I chose Drupal 10, save current setting, next contrib I'm going to work in, going to probably take Drupal 10 as well, and the PHP version I chose. If it's unchecked, it will just be for this update. Whenever you make changes here, it updates this link. This is a link test and develop remotely, or test, what do we say? Try with DrupalPod. And it updates that link so that link is clickable and ready to go all the time. I didn't know, I think it's overwhelming to bring the choices you made, like when the hide options, when we're looking at this page, should we tell the person what are the settings that are getting open, or should every time you click test and develop remotely, should open this and then you click. So basically 2 clicks to launch DrupalPod every time to make these choices and then click or not. I'd love to hear your feedback.
I was thinking that, well, clicking doesn't, like when you're launching Drupal pod, like I think it takes quite a bit of time, so extra click doesn't like change it too much. And I was also thinking actually that if this is something that people are not familiar with, so it might be nice to have some kind of warning that first time you do this, it will take quite a while. Because I think I haven't been using Drupal, but I just tried the browser extension, and I was thinking like, oh, this takes a long time. So I'm thinking that if somebody tries that for the first time, he or she will be kind of has the kind of chance to think, okay, I'm not going to wait, just going to close it. So kind of this kind of frustration possibility.
Yeah, that's half of a Gitpod issue itself. I think nowadays we're like 30 to 40 seconds to open. One of my feature requests to Gitpod is give the interface right away and then keep loading everything. But that's in the process and kind of out of our hand, unless we can add any messages if they are important of how long things might take or what to expect.
Ralph mentions in the chat that he agrees that the checkbox should go before the label. So that's the screen we're looking. Oh, at the bottom of the current screen. So yeah, I think we have consensus on that. I'm thinking that if the options are hidden by default, and I just click on the link to open Drupal pod, then it's going to be sort of a poor user experience if I realize after it's spun up that I needed to choose a different version of Drupal core. So, so that argues for not having the options at all on this page. But when I click try with Drupal pod, it shows me the options and gives me a big blue button to start it, or I can change the options first.
So you're saying when I click try with Drupal pod,
Yeah.
We don't need options anymore. And what happened when I click on it, the gray box opened.
Yes.
And maybe there's a big play button. I don't know, like something very obvious to like launch it already. Or so I can just see settings and click, and then I think I like the seeing it a moment before. I don't know if as a heavy user or like once you have more, if that's frustrating or it's okay. It's like click, or just let you quickly know that, yeah, that's what I'm expecting. I guess in the current browser extension, you always have to look at your options. It was missing save current setting, which would, I think, be helpful because you don't need to make, if there's changes you like, let's say you never like admin toolbar, you don't need to click it again and again. This would help you by saving it in your setting, which I think we should change the wording here.
Sure. Ralph, what did you want to say?
Make choices default or something.
Would it make sense perhaps, because you know if a user on Drupal.org has used DrupalPod and has saved the settings, so on the first click you open up those options per default, like Benji said, but as soon as the person has checked save current settings, then don't show those settings and leave the options button or the options link there, though, that the option is still there to adjust in case, but aside that, you can directly go into DrupalPod.
Yeah, I guess we can even add an option of always open options before launching.
Yeah.
And then it is your setting and you like it, then you choose. But if you like your defaults, you're not being bothered with it.
Yep.
I guess the only question then is if you've chosen to skip the options step, how do you undo that if you decide you do need to change the options?
We still have options there. We don't remove this word. So manually you can always click it, options. And in the options, you can have always options before launching. Does that make sense?
I guess so.
A small note, if we have that hide options there, I think that in hide options, the O should be like a small one.
Yeah, I also think the way Benji said, like once we'll switch it into a details element, I think having the word option and the little triangle would make it obvious. So we don't need to call it hide options.
But the same comment applies to save current settings. I think that should be sentence case rather than title case.
Yeah. Yeah, I think save current settings should change the wording as well.
Yeah.
Any ideas here? Trying to think. It's
kind of long, but use these settings next time.
okay. We call it options here and settings here. Should we use the same word?
Good point. Yeah, I think you should.
Which one? Are these options or are these settings?
I don't have a strong preference. I guess no one else does, but I have a slight preference for options. Simo, do you want to say something?
No, I'm trying to just figure out what's that, like translating in my head to Finnish.
So for now, it would be use these options as default. Right? That's what you said, Benji?
Yeah, but I think that's kind of long. I think save current options is probably better.
Nice. Make default. But yeah, too short.
Could be options.
Or maybe save these options rather than save current options.
Yeah, for me, it's not clear when we say save, where is it's being saved, where if we're using words like default, I understand what default means.
Ralph suggests make your options the default.
Make or set. Yeah, like set as default options.
Maybe set
shorter.
these options as default.
Yeah, I think these rather than your is a good idea. And Ralph gives a +1 to using these rather than your.
Okay.
And I might have one further question in regards of install profiles. What is the default? Because at the moment it looks like it's none.
My personal preference is always having Umami. I think that's in the browser extension today as well. So the default before user make choices, the default we make, I think would be Umami. But is that what you're asking? Because once then you set it and you choose your own defaults.
Yeah, but the question heads in the direction if the initial default or the default would be none according to the screenshot, then I consider it problematic. But if it's standard or Umami,
I
then
agree.
it's all fine.
Yeah, the screenshot is the screenshot looks like right now it was set to none. I'm about to choose Umami. Yeah. Okay. Trying to think. So we said we're not going to use any different verbiage for between patches and issues.
Right.
That's going to stay the same. There's some edge cases of where. Here's an example. Tell me what you think about this. So if you work with issue forks, there's one more step Drupal.org forces you to do, which is this green button. If you didn't click this button, you might open an issue fork and you wouldn't be able to push code. The only way to push code, go back to the page, click this green button. Now you can push code. So in today's browser extension, I give some help text that tells you you're not logged in, you won't be able to do it. And once you do log in, I tell you, you didn't click get push access, you won't be able to make changes. And if you did that, then you're not getting any more warnings or help text like that. Is that something that will be useful? Is that something we'll deal with? Like, should it be maybe as part of the options here, some help text that tells person what they probably, I don't know, because some people, when they want to just test something, they do not need any push access.
Yeah, so if clicking on the try with Drupal pod link, if that brings you to a confirmation form, it shows you your options and you have to click the button to actually start things up. I think that's a good place to add the information that, oh, you don't have push access to this merge request. Or if you want to update the merge request, first click the green button on, well, the text is getting awfully long, but give some sort of instructions.
I think once we're in, I mean, now that we're going to update Drupal.org, we probably could give you, click here to get push access. You don't even have to use that, the other button somewhere else. But
oh,
yeah,
so you're
think
suggesting that you just repeat the get push access button on the confirmation form?
something, yeah, I guess, because it's right there. It's the same button. We can tell them they will be, yeah, if the gray box will be here, then they can see where it is, I guess, but it's so, but I like that that help text can appear in this additional option, then it doesn't clutter the issue page itself.
Right.
Okay. And I was thinking also that, like what you just said, Benji, by default, or the default setting would have open options every time before launching DrupalPod. And you could uncheck it, but for everybody, it will always open until they decide, I don't need open. I don't need it open by default all the time. That would help more with the help text and get people knowing more what's about to happen.
Yeah.
If we have the what's this, right? We said instead of the via DrupalPod, we'll
Yes.
have what's this. Now that we have an option because something was clicked, should there be any additional documentation? What's this again? Or that what's this is enough that we have above?
I don't see why you would want multiple links to the documentation.
Okay.
And we are getting close to the end of the hour. Go ahead, Ralph.
Just one quick idea. If the options are collapsed and if people chose to keep them collapsed and use their new defaults, would it make sense to add a description underneath the line of try with DrupalPod, and in that brief line add the setting of which Drupal core version it is, which PHP version, and which modules enabled and which profile, so you can quickly reassure if the in the context you're right now, it would be the right thing, or if you need to go into options again, just as a reminder and a failsafe.
But remember that this will become now 40 times.
Oh, okay.
Or what the amount of forks and patches we have would be displayed there. So I just think overall to the page, it's adding a lot of text.
That's true. Okay.
Maybe on hover, but that's a whole accessibility issue. So we don't do that.
Okay, I think that's about all we have time for, unless anyone has closing remarks. Thanks, Offer, for doing all of this. Looks really fun.
Thank you for this wonderful group. This was so super helpful, and I hope we'll be able to implement it soon.
We look forward to it. And I'll suggest some boilerplate text that you can add to the issue when you make a comment on it, linking to the usability issue. I'll give you that in the Slack channel.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. And I'll be back next week. Hope you can make it.
Thank you. Have a nice weekend.
That's weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.